What's up, you beautiful people? Welcome to another video. I think the single most important skill that you can develop, not just as a CEO, but as a leader of people, is the ability to communicate effectively. And that's because your job as a leader is less and less about doing the thing, doing the task tactically that gets you to the place that you want to go. And instead, you start working through other people, right? Now they're your hands and they're an extension of your will, your vision, the direction that you are sending the team. And so your ability to communicate effectively is everything. And this is a skill that I really sucked at, to be honest, when I was first starting in the game of business and trying to lead other people, especially peers. I really struggled to communicate effectively to people that I perceived as peers at that time, that I was just happened to be in a position of like, oh, you're the manager, you're the leader of this team. It's like, how do I get these people to want to row the boat in the same direction that is in alignment with my goals, right? And I really struggled with this. And so I went and I studied all of the best communicators that I could find, the best public speakers, the best presenters, the best CEOs that I thought were like just heads and shoulders above everybody else when it came to communicating in a clear, concise, and inspiring way. And I broke down, what is it that they do? How do they do this exactly? Because everything's a skill, right? Especially communicating, it's a skill. If we can break it down to its component parts, then we can replicate it ourselves. And so I distilled it down to three distinct categories. I call this the 3 Ds of effective communication. I'm going to break it down for you guys here so that you can go, and regardless of whether or not you're a CEO, you're just a leader of people, like you can communicate more effectively. And I'm telling you, like, this is one of those super skills that I didn't fully appreciate at the time when I started trying to like level up as a communicator, as a speaker. But this is one of those skills that will pay dividends for the rest of your entrepreneurial and just general life. So let's break it down. Number one, the first thing that you have to do is you have to deliberate. You actually have to, before you start talking about something, you have to have already thought about what it is that you want to say. The mistake I think a lot of people make is they think for the very first time as their mouth is moving on a topic. So if they're asked, what should we do about XYZ? The very first time that they are thinking about it is as they are giving a real-time answer. So not only is the other person hearing for the very first time what you think on the topic, so are you. You're discovering it as you go. And you're probably like 30 seconds into your explanation, your answer, your whatever, and you're realizing, oh, do I really agree with that? Is that actually what I think? Or am I just happen to say that because that was a soundbite or as a headline I saw somewhere else? Like, what do I really think about this? And what I want you to understand here is that the mind filled with the voices of other people cannot hear itself think. And if you can't hear yourself think, then you can't speak clearly. You can't speak in an impactful way. And that is what ultimately leads to rambling. Rambling is just verbal overflow from cluttered thinking. So the first thing that you have to do is you actually have to get really clear about what it is that you think about things. And the time to do that is before you are prompted. The recommendation here is very simple. Like for all the different questions, all the different initiatives, all the different vision statements that you're going to try and get people to, move towards whatever in your life, you have these things that you need to communicate frequently. You need to be really clear about what you think on that topic. And the best way to do that is by thinking on paper. I just did a video about thinking on paper, like the 1%, but just generally what I want you to do is just get a pen and actually write a 1-page paper on a topic that you think about. Just start like brain dumping it out there, get it out there. And that will put you out there like 90% further along the journey of becoming a good communicator than the majority of people. Because most people never take the time to actually figure out what it is that they think on a topic before they're prompted. And I'm telling you, if you want to come across as a CEO, as a founder, as a leader who has no clue what they're talking about, wait to start talking on a topic for the very first time. Like the first time you ever start thinking about it is when somebody prompts you. If you're not sure where to start on this, here's a pro little tip, something that I did way back in the day, is when you're listening to podcasts and you're listening to somebody who's a great communicator on a podcast, like they're doing an interview, maybe you're listening to like Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson. He's a great communicator, asks great questions, and his guests are almost always fantastic speakers, fantastic communicators, because they are domain experts. They have spent years of their life thinking deeply on the topic that they're then going to share about. So one of the things that you can do is as you're driving around, you're listening to these podcasts, is when you hear Chris or whoever ask a question of this domain expert, pause the video, and I want you to think about how would you answer it? How would you answer that question in that moment right then? It's probably not going to be pretty, but that's a practice rep, right? You can then take that question later, you can put it into your journal, you can write about it, get distilled. What do you actually think on this thing? So that's step number one, is actually deliberate and think on the thing that you want to potentially talk about in the future. The second D here is you have to distill. Once you've thought and you've done this like chaotic brain dump, and you've done your long form journaling on a piece of paper, is that you actually have to distill and concentrate your thoughts on the topic. Because what you're trying to do, like effective communication, is taking an idea and making it as impactful as possible. And so you want your thinking to be sharp like this, like the tip of a spear, not blunt like a hammer. Because the spear, like if you put 100 pounds of force behind a spear, you can ram that through a person. You put 100 pounds of force behind a hammer, like you just break a bone. Like that's, that does damage. But you want your ideas to penetrate. You want them to get through, and the best way to do that is to concentrate and distill them. So this is hard. This is why you need to be thinking in terms of frameworks, thinking in terms of mental models, thinking in terms of analogies. How can I take this thing and compare it favorably to something else that somebody's already familiar with? You're connecting ideas in interesting ways that then makes it easy for somebody to take a mental hook into the idea and take it along with them. But if you have done like 10 pages of thinking on a topic, you can't just dump that on somebody. You need to go and you need to distill that down to what is the single most impactful way that you could communicate this in a single sentence. For instance, Steve Jobs said the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller, because the storyteller controls the narrative of a generation. That is a very powerful sentence around the idea of storytelling and communication being the most important, valuable skill in the world. He could give you 10 pages of dialogue explaining why that is, but his ability to distill that into a single sentence makes it the spearhead that penetrates and sticks with you. So think in terms of maxims. Think in terms of aphorisms. This is one of the reasons why I really loved early Twitter, when you had like the 280 character limit. It's because it forced you to be a really distilled, concentrated thinker. You don't want to be the diluted thinker who needs 10 pages to get an idea across. You want to be the one who can say it in a single sentence, because that's what a leader, that's what a great CEO does. If you're sitting in a meeting and they say something and you're just like, damn, that hit, it's not because they took 20 minutes to get there. It's because they said one sentence that you're like, that just changed my life. So think in aphorisms and maxims, distill your thinking down. That's step number 2. The third D is now you got to deliver this bad boy, right? You actually have to deliver this thing to people. The mistake I think a lot of people make when it comes to communication, this is like a great quote, is the great mistake in communication is believing that communication has occurred, right? You say something and you just take it for granted that the other person understands exactly what it is that you want them to do. And if you've ever tried to lead a team, chances are very good that you thought you were being a clear communicator. You thought you were very clear about, like, here's what I need you to do, X, Y, Z. Here's what the project looks like when it's completed, all that stuff. And then they go and do it, and they come back with something that looks nothing like what you had in your mind. You're like, where did we go wrong here, right? The problem is that the way that we deliver our ideas is only as impactful as the vehicle we deliver the idea inside of, right? Victor Hugo said, there's nothing more powerful in the world than an idea whose time has come. But an idea is only as impactful as the vehicle we use to communicate it. And that is what brings us to storytelling. Again, like Steve Jobs said, the storyteller is the most powerful person, right? Our ability to wrap ideas inside of stories makes them relatable, makes them memorable, and it makes them undebatable. Like, I'm watching a TV series right now, Young Sherlock, and for the most part, when you're watching something that's in story form, you don't question the legitimacy of the story. Not in real time. You go with it. You put yourself, your imagination, you are inside the story. That's what makes it so powerful. You give people a vehicle to get inside of it. They see themselves, right? And so you don't question the veracity of what you're consuming in that moment. It's only later, after you're done watching it, we're like, that didn't really make sense. Why did they do this? Why did they do that? At the time, you were immersed in it. Suspension of disbelief is a powerful thing that people automatically do when you insert them into a story. So If you want to bring down their barriers, which people will have when you're trying to communicate an idea because your idea is probably clashing with some idea that they have, if you want to bring that down, we do that by going around it with the vehicle of story. Then we insert the idea through this emotional narrative that then later they might look back on and be like, that doesn't exactly make sense, but it's too late. The seed has already been planted. It's already sticky. It's already inside of them. So for every point that you want to make, you need to actually sit down and deliberate. You need to do deep thinking on it. What do you think? You need to distill it, and then you need to figure out how to wrap it within the frame of a story. Because story at the end of the day is how people think about the world. It's how we make sense of everything that's happening around us. The simplest story that you can tell, simplest framework is something I call the 3 S's. So situation, struggle, solution. What was the situation that you were dealing with? What was the struggle that you went through to get to the end? And what was the ultimate solution that you arrived at? Simplest framework. We've done a number of videos on this channel about how to tell great stories, but I'm telling you, if you do those 3 things, if you deliberate beforehand, if you distill your ideas, and then you learn how to deliver them in an impactful way, you will be a top-tier communicator. And that is one of those skills that can change the world. So that's gonna do it for me, guys. I'll see you in the next video.